For those who don't know me, I'm Maya, and as sole owner of this property, you have 1 hour to clear out of my home.
The old brass key felt cold in my hand, a stark contrast to the humid Minnesota air. My voice, when it came out, didn't tremble. The locksmith is on his way. I looked past my sister Olivia, past her fiancé Ethan, and met my parents' stunned gazes. Sheriff Miller will be here in 10 minutes, just to keep the peace. Peace. The irony of that word hung heavy in the pine-scented air of the cabin my grandfather built. For years, I had sacrificed my own peace for theirs, and this was their repayment. A casual demand to vacate my own home, the home I had bled for. But they miscalculated. They saw the quiet girl who always yielded, the one who paid bills without question and absorbed their neglect like a sponge. They didn't see the woman she had been forced to become. They didn't see the steel that had replaced the sorrow. My sister Olivia's perfectly curated expression of shock was almost comical. Her mouth, usually forming a condescending smirk, was now a perfect O of disbelief. Ethan, her slick developer fiancé, tried to step forward, to use that commanding corporate voice of his, but he stopped short when he saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't anger, it was finality. This wasn't a negotiation. It was the end of a long, painful chapter and the beginning of my reclamation. Before you judge me, before you call me cruel for evicting my own family from this lakeside legacy, you need to understand how we got to this point. You need to know that this war wasn't started by me. I was just the one who decided to end it. And if you've ever felt like a ghost in your own life, a silent spectator to your own story, take a second right now to hit that like button, so I know I'm not alone in this. It all began 3 years ago, not with a bang, but with a quiet, shameful secret hidden in a stack of unopened mail. The letters were always tucked under a pile of catalogs on the hallway table, bright red stamps screaming, "Final notice!" At first, I believed the story my father, Howard, told me, a bad stock market tip, an investment gone south. It was a plausible lie, one that painted him as a victim of circumstance, not choice. But the truth, as it often does, came out in a moment of quiet desperation. I found him one night in the garage, sitting in the dark, the scent of cheap whiskey in the air. That's when he confessed it wasn't a bad investment. It was years of secret sports betting, a hidden gambling addiction that had devoured his retirement and was now coming for my grandfather's legacy. He had bet our home away, one losing team at a time. While he was drowning in shame, my sister Olivia was posting filtered sunset pictures from a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, captioning them with "had blessed, completely oblivious." So I acted. I took on every freelance design project I could find, working 70-hour weeks from my small bedroom, my screen glowing long after the lake outside had turned to Black Mirror. I refinanced the mortgage under my own name, drained my savings, and lied to everyone, telling them things were getting better. I became the keeper of my father's shameful secret and the silent savior of our home. I wonder, for those of you watching right now, maybe late at night when the world is quiet, have you ever had to be the strong one? If you've ever had to clean up a mess that wasn't yours, just type, "I was there," in the comments below. For 2 years, that was my life, a quiet, exhausting cycle of work, worry, and paying off a debt that wasn't mine. I thought that was the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part was yet to come, and she arrived with designer luggage and a dazzling smile. She didn't call first. Of course not. The front door of the cabin just swung open one Saturday in June, and there she was, Olivia, my golden child sister, looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine, all white teeth and sun-kissed hair. But she wasn't alone. Tailing her was a man named Ethan, her new fiancé. He was tall, dressed in a linen shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and had a handshake that felt more like a business transaction than a greeting. They weren't returning home. They were making a strategic landing, a pair of perfectly polished predators. While Olivia air-kissed our mother, Carol, and basked in our father Howard's adoring gaze, Ethan's eyes weren't on the family reunion. They were scanning the property. I watched him from the kitchen doorway as he clocked the 80 feet of prime lake frontage, the old-growth pines, the potential for a new, bigger boat dock. He wasn't seeing the porch where our grandfather taught us to fish, or the oak tree with our childhood initials carved into it. He was seeing a portfolio asset, a teardown opportunity with a 7-figure price tag. In an instant, the quiet equilibrium I had fought so hard for shattered. The air, once filled with the calm hum of my work and the scent of brewing coffee, was now thick with Olivia's expensive perfume and the low thrum of their ambition. I stood there holding a dish towel, and it was like I had become invisible. The savior of the house, now just part of the scenery, a ghost in my own home. My invisibility wasn't an accident. It was a choice my parents made every single day. My father, Howard, a man who had spent the last 2 years shuffling through the house like a phantom wrapped in shame, suddenly came to life. He laughed loudly at Ethan's slick jokes, his eyes shining with a kind of desperate hope I hadn't seen since before the gambling debt surfaced. My mother, Carol, began to orbit Olivia, fussing over her, making her special meals, as if Olivia was the fragile one who needed protection, not the daughter who had single-handedly kept a roof over their heads. One morning, I brought up the fact that the property tax was due at the end of the month. Mom just waved her hand dismissively, not even looking up from the magazine she was flipping through with Olivia. "Oh, Maya, let's not bog ourselves down with those dreary things right now," she said, her voice light. Ethan was just telling us about the market in Naples, Florida. It was as always, Ethan was just telling us. He filled their heads with visions of a life of ease, a brand new condo with a pool, all funded by the sale of this land. They were so dazzled by the promise of a future without struggle that they completely erased the past I had secured for them. My quiet competence was a reminder of the failure they wanted to forget, while Olivia's shiny ambition was the fantasy they desperately wanted to believe. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? To be the most responsible person in the room but have the quietest voice. I want you to think for a second. In your family, are you the one who speaks the hard truths, or the one who prefers the comfortable fantasy? There's no judgment here. Just let me know in the comments by typing truth or comfort. And with my parents thoroughly enchanted, the real campaign began, not with shouting, but with whispers and paint swatches. The whispers started first. I'd walk into a room and the conversation between my sister, her fiancé, and my parents would stop abruptly, replaced by a strained, artificial silence. Then came the paint swatches. Olivia decided the living room, with its warm, honey-colored wood panels, chosen by our grandfather, was dated. She taped up swatches of sterile grays and whites. Grage, Chantilly lace, agreeable gray, talking loudly about neutralizing the space for potential buyers. It was an occupation of 1,000 tiny cuts. One afternoon, I came home to find my entire kitchen reorganized. Spices I had arranged by cuisine were now in alphabetical order. My mismatched beloved coffee mugs were gone from their hooks, replaced by a set of 12 identical white ceramic cylinders. "It was just so cluttered, Maya," Olivia said with a bright, unconvincing smile. "I thought I'd help you create a more functional workflow." Ethan's approach was less direct, but more insidious. He'd leave architectural magazines open on the table, all showing Spartan glass-walled boxes. "Imagine this whole wall gone," he'd muse to my father. "Think of the sightlines to the lake. Would really improve the resale value." Every conversation was about erasing the past to sell the future. My grandfather's hand-carved mantelpiece was too rustic. The worn armchair where I read every night was bad for staging. I wasn't just being ignored anymore. I was being methodically erased from the home I had saved, one paint swatch, one moved object at a time. They were making the house hostile to my memory, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they made it hostile to my presence. The moment of truth came on a humid Wednesday night in August. The air was thick with the sound of crickets and the scent of damp earth from a recent rain. I'd come downstairs for a glass of water, moving quietly through the dark house. They were on the screened-in porch, their voices low, confident they were alone. They thought I was in my room, asleep with my headphones on. That was their first mistake. Ethan was speaking. "The key is the family trust," he said, his voice a low, persuasive hum. "We don't mention a sale yet. We frame it as protecting the asset for the future, for everyone. We tell her it simplifies taxes, protects it from creditors." My sister's voice, sharp and pragmatic, cut in. "She's sentimental. She'll buy into the protecting Grandpa's legacy angle. But will she sign if her name isn't in a position of control?" Then came my father's voice, weak and hesitant, but ultimately complicit. "If you tell her it's the best way, that it frees her from the burden, she might do it. She's always done what's best for the family." That line cut deeper than any insult. They were planning to weaponize my love, my sense of duty, against me. Then my mother, Carol, asked the question that sealed their fate. "And the price? Are you sure it's a fair offer, Ethan?" He assured them it was a clean, fast, all-cash deal from a trusted colleague. I stood there, hidden in the shadows of the doorway, and I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I felt a switch flip deep inside me, a cold, chilling clarity. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a conspiracy, and they had just shown me their entire hand. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't water the plants. I took the thick manila folder containing the deed, the mortgage documents, and every single tax receipt, and I drove into town. The sun was bright. The lake was sparkling. But all I felt was the cold resolve that had settled in my bones. My destination was a small, unassuming law office on Main Street, run by a man named Arthur Henderson. Mr. Henderson had been my grandfather's fishing buddy for 40 years. He had a handshake like worn leather and eyes that had seen it all. I sat across from his heavy oak desk, the one my grandfather had helped him move in back in 1982, and I laid out the whole ugly story, ending with the hushed conversation I'd overheard on the porch. He listened without interruption, his fingers steepled, his expression growing sterner with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed, a deep, weary sound. Maya, he said, his voice raspy but firm. Your grandfather didn't raise a fool, and he didn't build that cabin for vultures to pick apart. What they are planning isn't just immoral, it's called conspiracy to commit fraud. Hearing him put a legal name to their betrayal solidified everything. I wasn't overreacting. I was under attack. That meeting was the turning point. It was the moment I stopped being a victim of their story and started writing my own. I have to ask you, sitting there watching this, what do you do when you reach your breaking point? Do you retreat or do you regroup and fight? Let me know in one word in the comments, retreat or fight. That afternoon, I left Mr. Henderson's office not with tears, but with a notarized, legally binding notice of eviction for my own family. My final stand was ready. They chose the following Saturday for their summer kickoff party. The deck was filled with people I'd never seen before, men in expensive boat shoes and women with flawless blowouts, all laughing a little too loudly. Generic pop music pulsed from a speaker, clashing with the peaceful call of the loons on the lake. They were trying to sell a lifestyle, a brand, using my home as their showroom. I waited until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Then I walked through the house and onto the deck, the manila folder held firmly in my hand like a shield. I wasn't dressed for a party. I was dressed for a reckoning. The laughter closest to me faltered as I passed. I walked directly to the center of the deck, where Olivia was holding court, telling some exaggerated story about her latest brand deal. Olivia, I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the music. Ethan, a word. She turned, a flash of annoyance on her face. Maya, honestly, not now. We have guests. That was her final mistake. I took a deep breath and raised my voice so everyone could hear. I'm sorry to interrupt everyone's good time. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maya, and as the sole legal owner of this property, I'm afraid I have to say this party is over. The music seemed to stop on its own. I slid the eviction notice from the folder and placed it on the table in front of them. You have 1 hour to have all non-residents vacate the premises. Just then, the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway announced a new arrival. A familiar SUV with the county sheriff's emblem on the side. The game was over. The exodus was quieter than I expected. There was no shouting, no final dramatic argument, just the clipped, angry sounds of zippers on expensive luggage and the scrape of boxes being dragged across the hardwood floors. Olivia shot me a look of pure venom as she walked out the door, her fiancé, Ethan, trailing behind her like a loyal shadow. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders slumped in defeat. My mother, Carol, paused at the threshold and just shook her head, a single, silent tear of disappointment rolling down her cheek, disappointment directed at me. The silence they left behind was deafening, a hollow ache in the heart of the house. For a full day, I wandered through the empty rooms, the ghost of their presence lingering. I sat on the porch and questioned everything. Had I become the monster they thought I was? The answer came the next afternoon with a soft knock on the door. It was Mr. Henderson, my grandfather's old friend, holding a freshly baked apple pie, still warm from the oven. My wife, Sarah, thought you could use this, he said, his kind eyes looking right into mine. She always says your grandfather believed a good neighbor is worth more than a distant relative. You did what you had to do, kid. You protected the legacy. In that moment, holding that pie, the loneliness began to recede. That simple act of kindness meant more to me than any hollow "I love you" ever could. It made me realize that family isn't always about blood. It's about showing up. It's about respect. I'm curious, and I bet a lot of others are too. Where are you watching this from right now? And more importantly, who is the person that makes that place feel like home? You don't have to name names, just drop a comment about what makes you feel like you belong. That pie wasn't just a dessert. It was permission to finally, truly make this house my own. The reclamation began with fire. That evening, I gathered every trace of their hostile takeover. The glossy architectural magazines filled with soulless glass boxes, the cold gray paint swatches, the cheap, mass-produced decorative objects Olivia had scattered around, and I carried them to the old stone fire pit by the lake. As the flames licked at the pages promising maximum resale value, I felt a profound sense of release, as if I were burning away their influence, their greed, their judgment. It wasn't just cleaning, it was an exorcism. The next day, I began the restoration. I climbed into the dusty attic and found a heavy wooden chest I hadn't opened in years. Inside were my grandfather's treasures, his collection of hand-tied fishing lures, each a tiny work of art. A faded photograph of him and my grandmother laughing on the dock in the summer of '78. His favorite worn wool blanket. I brought them downstairs and gave them places of honor. The fishing lures went onto the mantelpiece, replacing a sterile glass vase. The photograph went on the central table. I draped the blanket over the very armchair they had called bad for staging. Then, I drove to the hardware store and bought a gallon of deep, rich forest green paint. I spent the entire weekend painting the living room, covering the memory of those pale gray swatches with a color that felt like the heart of the woods. With every brushstroke, I wasn't just changing a color, I was reclaiming a narrative. I was transforming a property back into a home, my home. The house began to breathe again, not with their shallow ambition, but with the deep, steady rhythm of its own history and mine. Weeks turned into a quiet, peaceful month. The house settled around me, the scent of fresh paint and old wood replacing the ghosts of resentment. I thought the story was over, that the silence was final, but they had one last move to make. It didn't come as a tear-stained letter or a remorseful phone call. It came as an email on a Tuesday morning with a subject line that made my stomach clench for just a second. Legal notice regarding the property at 142 Northwood Lane. It wasn't from them. It was from a high-powered law firm in the city on behalf of Ethan. The email was a masterpiece of intimidation, full of words like unlawful eviction, verbal contract, and infliction of emotional distress. It threatened lawsuits that would drown me in legal fees for years. A year ago, a letter like that would have sent me into a spiral of panic. I would have cried, called them, probably begged them to stop. But now, I read the whole thing, took a slow sip of my coffee, and saw it for what it was. The last desperate roar of a bully who had lost control. There was no anger, no fear. There was only a quiet, profound sense of pity. My response took less than a minute. First, I forwarded the email to Mr. Henderson with a simple note. Arthur, for your records. His reply came back in under 5 minutes. Baseless intimidation. Don't waste a second of your energy on it. Then, I picked up my phone, opened my contacts, and found their names. Howard, Carol, Olivia. One by one, I tapped the screen. Block, block, block. It wasn't an act of rage. It was an act of sanitation. The final click was the sound of a door closing for good. So now the silence in the cabin is different. It's not the heavy, resentful silence they left behind, nor the hollow ache of loneliness. It's a peaceful, sturdy silence, the silence of a house that knows it's safe. This story was never really about a physical house with 4 walls and a roof. It was about building a home inside myself, a foundation that no one could threaten or take away. Living through this taught me a few invaluable, non-negotiable lessons, and I wanted to share them with you in case you ever need them. First, know your foundation. Whether it's the deed to a property, your name on a bank account, or simply your own skills and talents, understand your assets. Knowledge isn't just power, it's your right. Don't ever let anyone, not even family, be the sole keeper of your security. Second, boundaries are the highest form of self-respect. They aren't walls you build to keep love out. They are the lines you draw to teach people how to love you correctly. Saying no to disrespect is saying yes to your own peace. And third, find your allies. You don't have to fight alone. Find your Mr. Henderson, with or without an apple pie, a friend, a therapist, a mentor. Find the people who will stand in your corner and remind you of your own strength. This cabin is my legacy now, not because I inherited it, but because I fought for it. We all have a legacy to build, and if you believe in the power of rewriting your own story, of finding strength in the hardest moments, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and join this community. Let's keep sharing our stories, not as victims, but as the architects of our own lives. Thank you for being here with me today.